right, my last item, a staff update on traffic calming Bedford and East Streets.
All right, good evening, Council. Last September, we made a presentation at the workshop meeting regarding potential traffic calming measures that may be implemented on the two one-way streets of East Street and Bedford Street. And I believe we received consensus from Council at that time to proceed with the necessary engineering studies and other public outreach to justify any potential changes. So in your meeting packet this evening is a memorandum which summarizes those activities. And I just wanted to very briefly touch on them and get some feedback from Council on whether we should continue in this effort or whether we should put it on pause. So you have before you a memo, and I just want to touch on the high points. We did a traffic analysis to determine the number of vehicles traveling along the corridor and also the average speed of those vehicles. And in your packet is table 1 and that gives the results of that. And the average number of vehicles per day traveling along this route was anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 cars going in one direction on 2 lanes. And to put that in perspective, when you look at some PennDOT roads, East North Street has about 6,500 cars per day going on a single lane. East High Street, 18,000, North Hanover around 15,000. So, 2 lanes really isn't needed to convey the amount of traffic that is traveling along that route. Just as an example, we did a traffic study last year along North Franklin Street, and there was about 6,000 to 7,000 vehicles 600 to 700 vehicles per day traveling one way. So much more along this corridor, but certainly not enough to justify the need for two lanes. The second thing to point out is that the speeds were a little bit above the posted speed limit of 25, but not overly excessive. Your memorandum also has some other tables and that gives some estimated cost for any proposed changes, and also some conceptual plans that show converting each of the 2 lanes, each of the 2 one-way streets from a 2-lane street to a single travel lane street, and using the additional space generated from eliminating 1 lane to provide space for additional parking and also for a dedicated bicycle lane. Stephanie, if you could show one of the conceptual plans. All right, so zooming in on this, I believe this is East Bedford Street heading northbound between Lowther and between Lowther and North Street. And the blue shows existing property lines, and the red shows proposed markings to designate either the existing parallel parking stalls or additional parking stalls that would be created through changing from a parallel parking to a back-in diagonal parking, and also a dedicated bike lane. So in this case, we have 2 travel lanes, and we would reduce that to 1. The travel lane width would go from somewhere around 11.5 feet to somewhere between 10 and 10.2 feet. And the number of parking spaces would increase by 3 in this case. And then we would also have a dedicated parking lane, a dedicated bicycle lane. in looking at this, we did not have sufficient road width. This road varies from 38 and a half feet to 39 feet. So we didn't have sufficient space to put in two diagonal parking lanes, but keeping one parallel and one diagonal. But it would provide some additional parking. And also in looking at this, we elected to go to the side of the street that had the greater parking needs. So in looking at this section of roadway, as you can see, there's more townhomes on the right side than the left side. So that's where we put the diagonal parking. And also we place the dedicated bicycle lane in front of the diagonal parking to provide for a safer biking lane, as opposed to adjacent to a parallel where you have the potential for someone to open up a car door and hit a bicyclist as they pass by. We did some preliminary public outreach. We went to a East Side Neighbors meeting and presented the same thing that we provided to council at its September meeting. If council is amenable to pursuing this further, then we would suggest a more robust public outreach that would involve contact with or attempted contact with each of the properties that border the corridor through some door hangers, alerting them to a potential future letter, and then mailing each of the properties a letter with information and a questionnaire, and also using the Citizen Lab citizen engagement platform that the borough will be starting up soon to also do public outreach with a questionnaire to garner the amount of interest by the public for any changes. When we did go to the East Side Neighbors, there was about 30 folks or so there, and some people did not want to see any changes and others were supportive. So it would be helpful to go through this type of public outreach to get a better understanding as far as what the public would like to see along this corridor. Questions, comments from council?
Any questions from council?
I have one, Mr. Mayor. Just Mark, I don't know if there is any utility layout that would preference one side of the street for having that additional parking. And reason I'm going there is eventually we're going to be looking at providing charging capabilities, right, for vehicles. And one of the ideas that gets floated around is to tie them to existing utility lines. I don't know where the utility lines are going in Bedford, but that might be one factor we might want to choose in terms of where we put the additional parking. It sounded like you have a good reason to have it on one side, but maybe look at conveyances or easements we might want to do for charging stations as well.
All right, we'll take that into consideration.
All right, thank you, Joel.
I was able to attend the East Side Neighbors meeting. Actually did my bike ride with the police that night, so I was all about listening for bike lanes and looking and actually riding on those streets. So first of all, your presentation was great, and I really appreciate you folks coming out for public engagement. But I also love to ask the good question when I see something like that connects on another place. And when you pointed out the traffic volumes and how there's much higher traffic on some of the state roads, and there are just 2 lanes, and that sort of helps us get the idea that it is capable to change this without it really affecting. So there is one other road that maybe in the future we could look at, and that would be Noble, because I think the same jockeying happens in other places. So just since you've done this great work and you have a good kind of method, and it's such a short stretch. Just something that I would appreciate if we would ever be able to look at that. I know a friend at Goodwill EMS that also would back up the idea that it could be looked at. So thank you, Mark.
Anything else from Mark?
Were there, it sounds like there were a few residents who had some concerns about the change. Was there any reasoning behind that?
The cost,
Okay.
mostly.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay. Thanks.
So Mark, are you looking for consensus to move forward from council?
That would be helpful.
Okay. If heads are nodding, I think you have your consensus. Got a hands up, got some clapping going on. There you go.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Great idea.
All right, thank you, Mark.